Right now, there's an enormous concrete building on the edge of your town that is deliberately keeping like 20% of its interior space completely empty.
Yep, completely bare.
And the company running it is willingly paying millions of dollars a year to just maintain that dead space. Today, we're going to uncover why that empty air isn't an expensive mistake, but actually a stroke of financial genius.
It really is one of the most counterintuitive aspects of modern logistics. I mean, we tend to picture a warehouse as this giant dusty box, sort of like the final scene in that classic Indiana Jones movie,
Oh yeah, just endless static rows of crates gathering dust for eternity.
Exactly. But that image couldn't be further from the truth. Modern warehouses are incredibly dynamic, high-speed hubs. They don't just hold products. They actively process, sort, modify, and direct them.
So our mission for this deep dive is to basically shatter that outdated image. We are getting into the absolute cutting edge of warehouse strategy, ownership models, and the surprising economics that keep the global supply chain moving.
It's a huge topic.
It is. We're going to decode the hidden strategies and the intense specializations that these massive facilities use every single day. By the time we finish, you're going to have a completely newfound appreciation for how the things you buy actually make it to your front door.
To really understand how a modern warehouse operates, you have to shift your perspective. You have to stop asking how a business stores its goods and, well, start asking why a business uses a warehouse in the first place.
Right, because it's an active strategic choice, not just a passive necessity.
Exactly.
But I mean, if a company manufactures a product, the most logical and efficient path seems to be shipping it straight from the factory directly to the customer. Why introduce a massive, expensive middleman building into the equation? Doesn't that just slow everything down?
It sounds like it would, yeah. But it actually comes down to managing friction. The primary function of a warehouse is buffering against uncertainty. Global supply chains are remarkably fragile,
Oh, for sure. We've all
Yes.
seen that recently.
Right. So a warehouse allows a business to build a protective stockpile against sudden interruptions. Imagine a labor strike at a major shipping port or a sudden, unexpected shortage of raw materials used in manufacturing.
The warehouse acts as a giant shock absorber, basically, protecting the consumer from ever feeling those bumps.
That's spot on. It creates a physical decoupling point between the supply side and the demand side. And when it comes to demand, warehouses are critical for aligning supply with consumer behavior, especially when that behavior is wildly unpredictable.
Or tied to specific seasons, I'd imagine.
Exactly. There is a logistics strategy called spot stock warehousing. Rather than keeping all inventory at a central hub, a company will position a massive amount of seasonal items, say heavy winter coats or holiday decorations, in a localized warehouse very close to a specific target market.
Oh, I see. Just before that specific season hits, meaning they aren't trying to frantically ship winter coats from across the globe in mid-November when the first blizzard hits.
Exactly. They already moved them to a local hub in August, and they are just sitting there waiting for the temperature to drop so they can deploy them immediately.
That is so smart.
And when the season ends, the remaining localized stock is either liquidated or moved back to a centralized location to make room for the next season's goods. But the strategy goes much deeper than just moving finished boxes around.
Really? What else are they doing?
Well, warehouses also allow for a highly complex manufacturing strategy called postponement.
Okay, let's unpack this, because postponement sounds like me avoiding my taxes. How does procrastinating help a supply chain?
In logistics, postponement means delaying the final assembly, packaging, or customization of a product until the last possible moment. It is a brilliant way to reduce risk and slash inventory costs.
So they wait until they know what people actually want.
Right. Instead of a factory trying to guess exactly what specific varieties, colors, or language labels a particular region will want 6 months from now, they manufacture the goods in an undifferentiated bulk state. They ship those raw bulk goods to the warehouse.
And the warehouse just holds on to this giant pile of generic inventory.
Until the actual customer orders start rolling in. Once the true demand is known, the warehouse staff performs light assembly or custom packaging or localized labeling right there on the floor.
Wow. The data highlights a fascinating example of this with a process called kitting and dekitting. Imagine a manufacturer ships massive, plain cardboard boxes filled with bulk chocolates to a distribution center.
Right, because they don't know if they're going to sell better for Valentine's Day or Easter.
Exactly. If it's early February, warehouse workers take those bulk chocolates and package them into heart-shaped Valentine's boxes. That physical act of assembly at the warehouse level is kitting.
And if consumer demand shifts and those Valentine's boxes don't actually sell out at the retail level,
They pull them back to the distribution center, and the workers literally take the chocolates out of the unsold hard boxes and put them back into regular bulk inventory. That is de-kitting.
which is brilliant because the underlying product isn't wasted or heavily discounted just because the holiday passed.
So a modern warehouse is less like a long-term parking garage and more like a Formula One pit stop. It's all about high-speed, value-added modification rather than just sitting in the dark.
That is a highly accurate analogy, but because these facilities are performing all of these high-speed value-added services, the costs to run them are incredibly complex.
I can imagine. If these warehouses are acting like pit stops, constantly assembling, labeling, and repackaging products, the financial side has to be dizzying. How on earth does a business figure out what to charge for a space that is constantly shape-shifting?
It is a massive financial undertaking. When you combine warehousing costs and inventory carrying costs, you are looking at nearly half of a business's total logistics costs.
Half. That's wild.
Yeah, the fixed costs of warehousing alone can eat up around 20% of a company's total logistics budget.
And when you break down those typical warehouse expenses, it paints a very clear picture of where the money goes. Like 81% of warehouse costs are direct costs.
And the vast majority of that is simply paying for the physical footprint. 44% goes to storage and space costs. That encompasses rent, land acquisition, facility depreciation, utilities, property taxes, and insurance.
And then there's the human element, right?
Right. Labor makes up roughly 31% of the costs. Handling equipment like forklifts and conveyors takes up another 6%.
Which leaves 19% for indirect overhead.
Huh.
That covers management salaries, the massive IT systems required to track the inventory, telecommunications, and all that behind-the-scenes administrative infrastructure.
Exactly.
So if a company's running this massive operation, or say they are a third-party logistics provider, a 3PL that actually manages logistics and rents out space to various different brands under one roof, how do they figure out who pays for what?
That is the million-dollar accounting challenge, and there are two main schools of thought here. The traditional approach is, unsurprisingly, called traditional costing.
Makes sense. How does that work?
In this model, you calculate all your direct costs for a particular customer, their specific space, and their specific labor, and then you just slap a flat percentage on top to cover all of your indirect overhead.
Like just a standard markup.
Pretty much. You might decide on a flat 20% overhead rate applied evenly to everyone in the building.
But that seems like it has a massive flaw. Wouldn't that unfairly penalize your biggest customers while heavily subsidizing your most difficult, smallest ones?
It absolutely does. Imagine customer A is a massive, highly efficient account, generating $500,000 in direct costs. With a 20% flat overhead, they get billed an extra $100,000 to cover the building's admin fees.
Right.
Now, customer B is a tiny, highly chaotic account with only $100,000 in direct costs. They only pay $20,000 in overhead. But customer B's erratic shipping schedules might actually be requiring twice as much management time, double the IT support, and significantly more administrative headaches than customer A.
Well, yeah. So traditional costing completely obscures that reality.
Completely. Which is why the industry relies heavily on activity-based costing, or ABC. This is where you essentially act like a forensic accountant and trace costs directly to the specific cost drivers that caused them.
Wait, tracing every single cost driver? That sounds like an absolute administrative nightmare. Doesn't tracking all of those microscopic costs end up costing more in accounting hours than the money it actually saves the warehouse?
It requires robust software, certainly, but it prevents the warehouse from bleeding money on inefficient clients. A cost driver isn't just an abstract accounting term, you know. It is grounded in physical reality.
Give me an example.
Let's say one customer ships standard, perfectly square boxes that are incredibly easy to move. Another customer ships heavy, fragile, awkwardly shaped automotive parts. Those awkward parts require specialized handling attachments.
Oh, I see.
They drain the forklift batteries twice as fast because of the weight. They force the warehouse workers to move at half speed to prevent damage. Under activity-based costing, you bill that second customer for the extra labor hours consumed and the specialized equipment wear and tear.
Rather than spreading that cost out and forcing the easy customer to pay for it. That makes perfect sense. But that brings me back to the jarring statistic from the beginning of our deep dive.
The empty space.
Yeah. If I'm running a warehouse, I know I can't fill it to 100% capacity.
Yeah.
If I do, no one can move. The forklifts get stuck in the aisles.
Exactly, gridlock.
So I deliberately keep empty pallet locations, often called honeycombing in the industry, just so my team has room to maneuver and operate efficiently. Under this hyper-specific activity-based costing, who pays for that deliberately empty space, do you just bill a random customer for thin air?
What's fascinating here is the psychological genius built into activity-based costing. Excess capacity is never charged to a specific customer object.
Wait, why not?
Hmm.
If the space is sitting empty in a customer's designated zone, shouldn't they foot the bill?
If you charged a customer for unused capacity, two highly destructive things would happen to your operation. First, it would completely distort your internal metrics regarding how profitable that customer actually is, making a good client look like a financial drain.
Oh, true. And the second thing?
Second, and more importantly, it would encourage your warehouse floor managers to try and minimize that excess capacity just to make their departmental spreadsheets look better.
Oh, no. So they would aggressively cram the warehouse totally full to avoid the unused space penalty.
Exactly. Completely eliminating the necessary breathing room and ultimately destroying operational efficiency.
So they would gridlock the entire building just to hit an accounting metric. Where does the cost of that empty space actually go then?
It gets routed into a separate, specific account for the organization as a whole, typically called a planned excess capacity account. It is a formal acknowledgement that unused empty space is a necessary indirect cost of doing business efficiently. You are paying for maneuverability.
Because you have these massive fixed costs, plus the expense of maintaining this planned empty space year-round, it creates a massive strategic dilemma for any business. I mean, do you actually buy the building and own the real estate, or do you just lease the space you need?
It is arguably one of the most critical decisions a logistics executive will make. And the choice hinges heavily on a very revealing industry statistic. Maintaining full warehouse utilization throughout the entire year is extremely rare.
Right. The data indicates that the typical warehouse is only fully utilized between 75 and 85% of the time over the course of a 12-month cycle.
Which means that for 15 to 25% of the time, the sprawling physical footprint you desperately needed for your absolute peak season is just sitting there, completely empty.
Wow.
If you own the warehouse outright, you are absorbing the real estate costs, the taxes, and the maintenance for that empty space all year long.
It sounds like buying a massive 15-passenger van just because your extended family visits once a year for the holidays.
That is a very practical way to visualize it, yeah.
For that 15 to 25% of the time you actually need peak storage capacity, it makes way more sense to just Uber your warehouse space through a short-term public contract, rather than owning and maintaining the empty real estate the rest of the year.
Exactly. Let's break down how the three main ownership models attempt to solve this. First, you have the private warehouse. This is a facility that is entirely company-owned. The business buys the land, builds the structure, and operates it with their own employees.
The primary advantage there is maximum control, right?
Yeah.
You dictate every single process, you put your corporate logo on the sign outside, and if your volume, your overall throughput is consistently high enough and stable enough, it usually ends up being cheaper per unit.
Right, because you aren't paying a third-party middleman's profit margin. The drawbacks, however, are steep. Building a private facility ties up a massive amount of capital, tens of millions of dollars that a growing company might rather spend on research and development or marketing.
That's a huge opportunity cost.
Furthermore, you take on all the operational risk. Warehouses are federally classified as high-hazard workplaces. If you own the building, you own the total liability for worker injuries, structural fires, and environmental accidents.
Yikes. So then you have the public warehouse model. This is where you are essentially renting space from a 3PL, a third-party logistics provider. It is highly flexible.
Extremely flexible.
The agreements are usually short-term, sometimes even month-to-month. You share the massive building with dozens of other companies, though your specific inventory is physically partitioned and tracked separately by their software.
Public warehousing effectively converts your massive fixed costs into manageable variable costs. You strictly pay for the square footage and the labor you consume in a given month.
Sounds perfect for a startup.
It is the perfect strategy if you are testing a brand new market or dealing with wild seasonal fluctuations. However, you sacrifice total operational control, and if warehouse space gets tight in that specific geographic region, your monthly rental fees might skyrocket overnight.
And the third option acts as a hybrid middle ground, right? Contract warehouse.
Yep, the contract warehouse. This facility is dedicated entirely to just one client, but the real estate is owned and the labor is operated by a specialized third party.
So it's usually tied to a long-term agreement, often 3 to 5 years. It allows a company to get a highly customized facility built exactly to their specifications without having to become an expert in warehouse operations or human resources themselves.
There is also a fascinating financial maneuver that organizations use to get the best of both worlds, known as a sale and leaseback arrangement.
Oh, this is where the corporate finance strategies get incredibly creative.
A company will spend the capital to build their absolute perfect, custom, private warehouse. They design the exact dock doors they need, the exact ceiling heights, everything. Then, the moment construction is finished, they immediately sell the entire property to a real estate investment firm.
And then they just leave.
No, they simultaneously sign a contract to lease the building right back from the new owner.
So they get a massive, immediate injection of cash from the real estate sale, which they can pour back into growing their core business. They completely wipe the heavy fixed asset off their balance sheet, making their financial metrics look leaner to investors, but they still get to operate every single day in the exact custom building they designed.
It is a brilliant accounting move, though it obviously carries the long-term risk that when the lease eventually expires decades down the line, the new owner might raise the rent astronomically or simply refuse to renew. But it highlights the lengths organizations will go to manage the staggering price of physical space.
Getting the financial structure right is really only half the battle, though. Once you decide whether to rent or own, the actual physical reality of the building has to perfectly match the strategy of the inventory inside it. We've moved so far beyond just standard concrete floors and traditional wooden pallet racks.
Oh, completely. The rise of global e-commerce has fundamentally fractured how modern warehouses are engineered. You essentially have two parallel universes operating simultaneously, B2B and B2C.
Business to business versus business to consumer.
Exactly. B2B warehouses are engineered almost entirely around bulk efficiency. They are designed to move full, heavy pallets, or at the very least, full cases of product to retail stores or wholesalers.
So the entire layout is optimized for heavy machinery, specialized forklifts, and traditional economies of scale.
Right. But B2C, the massive e-commerce fulfillment centers that handle your online shopping, are entirely different beasts. They aren't picking pallets, they are picking eaches.
Eaches being the industry term for individual single units.
Yeah.
One tube of toothpaste, one specific pair of socks, one paperback book.
Exactly. And these B2C facilities have to manually pack and ship hundreds of thousands of these tiny individual parcels every single day. A standard forklift is completely useless for that kind of operation.
So to make the economics work, you need specialized pick slots, miles of high-speed conveyor belts, intricate barcode scanners, and increasingly massive fleets of autonomous robots navigating the aisles.
And this insatiable consumer demand for speed has popularized what is arguably the ultimate lean warehouse strategy, which is cross-docking.
Cross-docking is considered the holy grail of logistics. Walk us through how a facility manages to pull this off.
The singular goal of cross-docking is to bypass physical storage entirely. Imagine a long, narrow facility with truck doors lining both sides of the building. A massive inbound truck full of mixed, unsorted goods arrives at the receiving dock.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
The moment those goods are unloaded, they're instantly sorted based on their final destination, moved directly across the width of the building to the shipping dock, and immediately loaded onto a waiting outbound truck.
No storage racks, no putting things away on shelves.
Usually, the goods are completely in and out of the facility within 24 to 48 hours. It completely eliminates almost all of the holding costs, the inventory carrying costs, and the heavy labor associated with putting things away in a rack and then paying someone to pick them back up again a month later.
It acts as a high-speed route switching point rather than a storage unit.
Exactly.
But the orchestration required for that must be staggering. Your IT systems and your trucking schedules have to be flawless. If that outbound truck gets stuck in a traffic jam and is 3 hours late, the inbound goods pile up on the dock and the whole system instantly backs up.
It requires extreme precision, and cross-docking is just one type of specialization. You also have facilities built entirely around regulatory specializations, like bonded warehouses.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Bonded warehouses, also known as customs warehousing, are where goods are imported from overseas. but they are stored in a highly secured, government-monitored facility.
And the financial magic here is that the importing company does not have to pay any of the hefty government import duties or taxes until the goods actually leave the warehouse and officially enter the domestic market.
Which provides a massive cash flow advantage. A company can import goods, hold them securely, and delay paying the taxes on them until they actually have a buyer lined up. And beyond regulatory extremes, we have to look at environmental extremes, specifically the cold chain.
This is where the engineering gets absolutely wild. A cold chain warehouse is not just a big commercial refrigerator.
Not at all.
The cold chain consists of highly specific, heavily regulated temperature zones. First, you have controlled room temperature, which is meticulously kept between 15 and 25 degrees Celsius.
So this isn't for frozen food.
No, it is specifically designed for things like fresh produce or highly sensitive electronics that would rapidly corrode if exposed to high humidity.
Then you step down to refrigerated, which is maintained between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius. Then frozen, which hovers around -10 to -20.
And the requirements get even more extreme. Deep frozen operates continuously at -40 to -80 degrees Celsius. But for certain highly sensitive biological products like specific advanced vaccines or genetic materials, you require cryo storage.
Wow, cryo storage. That requires maintaining an environment at less than -196 degrees Celsius or -321 degrees Fahrenheit.
At those extreme temperatures, traditional warehouse operations completely break down.
Because humans physically cannot survive in there, right?
Yeah.
You aren't just tossing on a winter coat. Human bodies emit heat, which compromises the localized temperature, and the physical danger to the worker is immense. So how do they actually retrieve the inventory if humans can't go inside?
They rely entirely on automated storage and retrieval systems, known as ASRS. These are massive, pitch-black structural cubes where computer-controlled robotic cranes navigate impossibly narrow aisles, sometimes 150 feet in the air.
It sounds like a sci-fi movie.
The robots pull the pallets entirely in the dark. By removing humans, they don't need lighting, which generates heat, and they don't need wide aisles for forklifts, which wastes valuable refrigerated air.
The structural engineering alone to maintain a building that temperature without the concrete foundation shattering is mind-blowing. And it makes you realize that when we think of a warehouse, we are still aggressively picturing a standard building. But a warehouse might not look like a building at all.
The physical structure is entirely dictated by the nature of the inventory.
We are talking about massive steel silos holding agricultural grain, pressurized gas spheres holding volatile chemicals, cavernous liquid storage tanks for petroleum or commercial dairy products.
Or sometimes a warehouse is quite literally just a giant, temporary inflatable tent set up in a retail parking lot to handle a sudden surge in seasonal overflow.
Or it might just be a designated fenced-off patch of dirt, an open yard used to store heavy mineral deposits for fertilizer. If the space holds inventory in anticipation of future demand, it is fundamentally serving the strategic function of a warehouse.
It completely redefines the word. So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
I think the biggest takeaway is that you should never look at a standard cardboard delivery box the exact same way again.
That simple box is the product of immense invisible calculation. Exactly. When that package finally arrives on your front porch, it didn't just wake up from a nap in a dusty room. It successfully navigated a highly strategic, financially optimized, temperature-controlled, digitally tracked, and potentially cross-docked global network.
The delay between you clicking buy on a website and the box arriving at your door isn't a flaw in the system. It is a meticulously calculated feature, utilizing strategies like postponement and value-added services to customize exactly what you want right when you need it.
This raises a highly provocative question, though, about where this entire hidden world is heading. If the ultimate goal of strategies like cross-docking is to bypass physical storage entirely and move at the speed of demand, we have to look at emerging technologies.
Oh, like what?
Well, what happens to the warehouse industry when technologies like advanced commercial 3D printing at the retail level become the global norm? Will the warehouse of the future cease to be a massive physical building holding physical goods? Will it instead evolve into a localized, high-speed data center, simply transmitting digital product blueprints directly to a commercial printer in your neighborhood, or perhaps even a printer sitting in your own home?
Bypassing the physical supply chain and the heavy logistics entirely. That is a wild thought to end on. We go from a dusty box to a Formula One pit stop, all the way to a localized server rack.
The evolution of the supply chain never truly stops.
It really doesn't. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the hidden systems and the invisible networks that run your world, and the next time you see a massive concrete building sitting on the edge of town, remember it's not a graveyard for lost boxes, it is the beating heart of the global economy. See you next time.